Coach Mark.
Hi, Linda. Council President, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Council President Susan Honda.
Thank you. Anybody else want to introduce themselves? Please go ahead.
John Hutton, Parks Director.
Hi, John.
Hi.
EJ Walsh, Public Works Director.
Hi, EJ.
Ryan Call, City Attorney.
Hi, Ryan.
Hi.
Ade Ariola, Finance Director.
Hi, Ade.
Hi.
All right.
Councilmember Bruce was with you on the phone.
Oh, hi. Welcome.
Hey,
How you doing?
Good.
All right. Do we have any public comments? Probably not. Okay. Then we'll just go right into the committee business. The first order of business is approval of summary minutes, March 24, 2020. And I trust that all committee member have a chance to review the summary minutes. Do we have any questions?
No, move approval.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Let's move on to item B, resolution fee schedule amendment presented by the Deputy Director of Public Works, Desiree.
Evening, Chair Tran, committee members, Council President, and did we have other council members present? Yeah, I'm Desiree Winkler, the Deputy Public Works Director, and I am here proposing an amendment to our fee schedule. Primary purpose is to accommodate small wireless installations within the city, primarily in right-of-way. This is a new technology, not to us, but it is going to be new. It's going to be new to us. It's not necessarily new. It's been happening on agencies. As you're aware, we have recently approved 2 franchise ordinances for Verizon and AT&T to start the installation of small wireless. So what we needed to do was to develop permit processes and the associated fees related to accommodating them within the right-of-way. We don't have those currently now in our fee schedule, and what this fee schedule does is put those fees and formalizes them so that we can move forward and cover our costs as we start these installations. I'm happy to answer any more specific questions.
Desiree, I have a question. Based on the financial impact that you presented on your document, it said that the number of poles that they are looking at is between 20 to 30. So we are looking at about potentially 5,400 to 8,100 revenue for the city. Is that enough for us to cover any labor-related costs that we have to do?
Well, those specific costs are related to the leasing of city infrastructure. So that was an estimate of how many installations in the first year where they would want to utilize city poles. And we are capped at $270 per year by FCC ruling that's currently in place. So that cost is just specifically to cover, quote unquote, the rent, and that's not cost to cover, say, our permit fees. So we have separate permit fees that will cover the staff costs that are required for approving and reviewing permits.
Great, thank you. Committee members, do you have any input, questions?
Councilmember Tran, just I know that there's, Desiree, there's been some concern regarding 5G wireless. And I just wanted to make sure that it's clear at this point, we're not approving any 5G wireless. We're just putting in the infrastructure for this to occur. And that any antennas that go up in the city will be subject to all the environmental and health reviews that are required. So basically, we're just putting pieces in place so we can move forward if and when we decide to do so. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I move to forward the proposed resolution on the fee schedule amendment to the May 5th, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there anything else we need to discuss? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass 3-0. And the next item is Project 610, planning for the new joint use operations facility. Will be presented by the Public Works Director, DJ Walsh.
So good evening, Chair Tran and council members and staff that's on this. So before you tonight is Project 610, which is the planning for a new joint use operations facility, which is the fancy name for what we call the maintenance yard, our current maintenance yard. It's a facility that's used by Public Works, Parks, Community Development, and Police. All those different city departments use it. So this is a agenda item that's a follow-up to the conversation from the council retreat. The current facility, as most of you have been out there and are aware, it's failing. Literally, the building is falling over, and it's continuing to get worse. Additionally, since the council retreat, we've experienced 2 substantial thefts to the maintenance yard that obviously were not in the numbers that were shared at the council retreat. So this was an item that was in the budget amendment, or in the proposed budget amendment, to use $250,000 of 2019 REIT funding that came in beyond what was expected by the budget. So 2019 was a good year, so to speak, for REIT, and there was excess funding in there, specifically in the REIT fund. That's restricted funding, and this meets the criteria for that. However, as all the council members are aware, based on everything going on with the current pandemic, the budget amendment has been put on hold for the time being. So after discussion with the mayor and staff, the decision was made to advance this topic to try and keep that conversation going. And the real reason that we're doing that is we are getting closer and closer to a little bit of a point of no turning back with the current maintenance yard, where eventually at some point in the not too distant future, either myself or John Hutton are going to have to come to council and say, we need several $1 million. We're at the point where the building's literally fallen over or has been condemned, and we're out of time. So we're trying to do is be responsible in advance of that and not have a position where we've faced a catastrophe with this and we don't have a place for employees to go to work and have to make choices to shut down city services, which is what would happen. I mean, this houses all of the maintenance staff for the entire city. So with that in mind, that's why it's in front of you. We have been for the last 2 years, and frankly, this goes all the way back to Cary Rowe, have been looking at alternate locations because, similar to the conversation we had with council at the retreat, we have to keep the current facility online until such time that a new facility is operational. We can't send the staff away for 18 months and say, come back. So some physical boundaries that we have figured out is to be able to maintain one facility, so to not get to the point of some of the larger cities where we have 2 maintenance yards. This needs to be located between 308th and 330th. It needs to be west of I-5 and east of 8th Avenue. That's about the box we have to work in, that we can do it with 1 maintenance yard. As soon as we get outside of that box, we, to be responsive to the city, get to the point where we have to have 2 locations, a north location and south location. Obviously, that's more expensive. That's what we're trying to stay away from. Geographically, we need about 15 acres. Ideally, we need more like 18 to 20 to be able to continue to expand as the city expands, and there's a desire for additional services. But 15 is really that core minimum. So we have looked at countless sites, both developed and undeveloped, both privately owned currently as well as publicly owned. And we keep coming back to one site that actually meets all of the items that I kind of outlaid for you, and it's the south side of 312, right adjacent to the current maintenance yard, to the east of the Historic Society's building, or the city building that's used by the Historical Society. It's part of Steel Lake, the southern part of Steel Lake Park now. It would, as the kind of sketch works out, we can, and like I said, this is extremely preliminary at this point, we can maintain the existing soccer field, take out the ball fields and get that 15 acres, the baseball fields. Obviously, nobody wants to lose a park. That's not ideal by any stretch of the means, but that's kind of what we've all kind of concluded is probably in the best interest of the city. So what this will fund currently is bringing on a consultant to review all the work that's been done to date, all the assumptions that have been made, look at the area requirements that drove that 15 acres, look at the locations, make sure we haven't missed something, and make sure there's not a better site identified for the city. And then commence the planning, environmental, and engineering work. The last kind of component to the scope of work is to actually develop the cost estimates associated with the work. So ultimately, after that, that will drive a funding strategy. We've been working on a couple of ideas of how to do that. Obviously, this is used by multiple departments. It's used by the surface water utility as well as Parks Department that falls purely in the general fund. So there's some funding conversations that go along with that. Some areas are easier to fund than others, frankly. So ultimately, that'll have to come back to council to authorize continuing with the design and ultimately authorizing construction. But we're still a ways from that. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I know there has been, we did brief the Historical Society on this, and they provided a letter to the mayor and council. They do have a lease that will most likely expire before this is constructed. At that point, the city has some options. We can leave them there, obviously through their current lease, but we could, as a city, choose to not renew that lease. We could choose to renew that lease and keep them where they are, and basically work around them. That's probably not in the city's best long-term interest, but if that's what the answer is, that the Historical Society keeps that building and we effectively build around them, I'm confident we can find a solution there. It will probably have some other impacts, but those are the decisions we need to make. Frankly, we're not far enough along to really have an informed conversation on that. We need to do some of our homework to be able to confirm some of the sizing requirements and make sure that what we have assumed to date actually is accurate. I'm fairly confident it is, but make sure it's accurate and we're not going down a rabbit hole that doesn't work right out of the gate, or conversely, that we have come up with an area that is oversized and we can reduce it, and that negates that entire issue. So there's a lot of homework to do there before we can really dig into that conversation. But that's where we stand.
Thank you, EJ. Committee members, do you have any questions for EJ?
I do.
Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand because I'm on two different, I'm on the phone and I'm on the iPad. I have a couple of questions. One, EJ, so let's say we do the 250,000 for the contract, but where are we going to find the 2 million to build the plan that you have, including, it sounds to me like you want to take out the Carl Grosch soccer field that has turf field, correct?
No, so we are proposing that the turf field would remain. We're proposing to leave that exactly how it is.
So what field are you taking out? What soccer field are you taking out?
We're not taking out a soccer field. And again, this gets back to the analysis. What we've identified is to get to that 15 acres, we can leave the soccer field and take out the two underutilized baseball fields that butt up to the high school. But the soccer field would stay.
I'm really uncomfortable with this. I'd like to take a tour to see what the building looks like and what your planning is. I'm a little uncomfortable because we're talking about spending. I don't think we should be starting any new projects right now. I know that you said that it sounds like the building is falling down, but we don't. Let's say we pay for the consultant contract for 250,000. It sits on a shelf because we don't have the money to build anything. I just need to look at this.
So we have done that with council several times. I'm happy to meet you out there and take you on a tour of the maintenance yard. I will tell you that currently we have some limitations based on the whole staff separation. So I can't take you in all of the buildings, but I'm happy to meet you out there and show you some of what I'm
all you have to do is take me on the outside.
Sure. I will work with Jerry Lynn to get a time set up for you. That being said, the Marwan Saloom, my predecessor, as well as Kerry Rowe, his predecessor, the parks director's predecessor, have all been telling council for going on 14, 15 years that this facility needs to be replaced.
Oh, and so, excuse me, AJ, so it's coming to a head right now when we have this COVID?
No,
coming in? I mean, I'm a little uncomfortable with it.
Sure. It came to a head several years ago, and we have been ignoring this conversation. And it came up again last fall when a section of the ceiling fell on our staff's head. And it was part of the council retreat. And then, like I said, it's not just coming up, it's been ongoing for a long time.
I don't want to move this forward until I look into this further. Councilmember Copang, do you have anything to say?
Linda, I certainly understand the reticence that you have in committing to $2 million at this point, but I don't think that's what we're doing. I think once you've toured the facility, you're going to see that it's an absolute embarrassment. And the fact that we as a city have such a substandard facility for our employees to use, it's just not acceptable. We need to look at this, and this has been an ongoing issue for many years now. Kerry Rowe hasn't been with the city for almost 7 years now. So so it's just this is not a new conversation, but it's a conversation that's coming to a head because of the substandard facility that we have now, and it's only getting worse.
Yes, and I'm perfectly willing to look at that, but I'm not going to go ahead with making a decision right now until I look at what's going on. And I know I'm new to the council, but I need to see that. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm perfectly happy to vote to move this forward to the council for full discussion, and I think that would certainly allow you time to at least see the outside of the building and get a little bit more perspective firsthand between now and the council meeting, and then make a decision at that point. But I think to hold it up in committee, I don't know that we need to do that.
Well, and I'm perfectly fine with that, council member. I'm wondering if council member Baruso would also like to tour the facility or to get a better idea of what's going on.
EJ, with this 250,000 is only for us to plan and look at options, right? I mean, this is not a to finalize the plan. We're not even there yet.
No. So the goal would be this would get us through the environmental phase, but so this would get us essentially to the, a lot of that legwork you're doing up front, but this would get us to about the 10% design plan, and then we would come back to council for authorization to advance the design if that's where it goes. Ultimately, the one thing I will add is, this is identified in the SWIM CIP. This was a big discussion as part of the CIP update last summer. And there is money associated with construction. I believe it's in 2024, 2025 that's identified for this. I believe it's $2 million for SWIM's contribution to this.
And that funding source is relatively steady. It's not subject to the vagaries of the sales tax for, say, or REIT funding as a whole. I mean, that's
correct.
Yeah.
That is about as steady as you get. That's part of your property tax. So that funding is associated with it. There's other funding revenues. This is something that's eligible, like I said, for REIT. This is something that's eligible for other funding sources that are not general fund. Ultimately, like I said, my biggest fear is that one of these meetings I have to show up and literally tell you the building fell over. I had to send employees home. We're just not going to do maintenance for the next 2 years because we're getting very close to that.
And I thank you. I would appreciate just being able to see what's going on. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm happy to meet you there tomorrow if you want, or Thursday. I will work with Jerry Lynn. I'll shoot her an email when we get done. If that works for you, Linda.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Councilmember Tran.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Chair Tran, I just want to, Council President Han has had her hand up for a moment. I just want to make sure that you're aware. If you tap the screen and open up the participants list, you can see the members with their hands up.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry to interrupt.
I was looking for that earlier. Council President, go ahead, please.
I think you're still on mute, Council President.
Susie.
Unmute now. Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Baruso wants to speak too also. EJ, I've gone through the building. I understand that the building's not safe. Simply put, it's probably not safe for people to be in. And it's a concern, but I am concerned about taking park property away when we have a growing city. And Steel Lake is one of our most used parks. We know it's overused now. We don't have enough space for parking. It has needs, future needs, and I'm concerned about taking park property to build this. And and I'm also concerned about spending money right now during this COVID crisis. But is there any other location that would work at all? Could you buy the property next to the current site and expand that way?
The single-family homes or the apartment complex?
The single-family homes would probably be less expensive.
Not really is the short answer. We would need to buy that doesn't solve the problem with the hills. We would need to buy a lot of houses going north. In short, that's part of what we're asking for permission to look at. We have not been able to identify any other sites within the city. We have exhausted all possibilities, and frankly, this is something that got dropped in my lap, not something I necessarily started as well. So I mean, we've been looking at everything. I'm not aware of any properties, and I certainly would not recommend, although it's technically an option, of going the condemnation route on alternate property. But frankly, that just drives up the cost. We've been watching for multiple years for properties to come onto the market that would fit the bill for this, and there hasn't been any. When you get into that size of a property in the city core, it's more, we would have to acquire multiple properties and put them together. and that's not a hugely viable option. What I will say related to the Steel Lake is you are absolutely right. And if John wants to jump in, he's more than welcome to. I know he's on the call, but I don't think anybody wants to lose a park. I think we are all in complete agreement on that. One of the things that we preliminarily talked about doing is over parking the side to actually provide additional parking, because this is not in the developed portion of the park. To actually, as part of this project, alleviate a lot of the concerns that you brought up. So that would be part of our project, is to mitigate that and make that park better. But certainly, I agree with you. I mean, no one wants to lose a park parcel. But the other side to that is, frankly, if we don't, we probably need to throw another $5 to $10 million into this for property acquisition.
And I'm happy to weigh in extensively with EJ, and we're all in agreement. Nobody likes to lose a park, but it is probably the best option that we have. And we're going the extra mile to preserve Carl Grosch Field, and we'll actually have more parking for that field, which is the heaviest used portion of the south side of the park. This way, we don't have to touch the larger park on the other side with the lake on the north side, and it's probably the best option that we have, and it's definitely a need that is far past its time. So from a parks perspective, certainly nobody likes to lose any, but it's the right thing to do for the department and the city.
Can I ask a question about a piece of property over by Celebration Park where the old airport was, next to the school district? I think it's their kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Is that big enough? That it's for sale. There's a sale sign on it.
No, it's about 25% of what we need, if that.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, John and EJ, how many sites have you been able to look at before you decided on this particular site?
I don't have an exact number, upwards of 50. And we looked, and frankly, we've had some very long conversations about, are we better off doing 2 smaller sites and trying to find a way to split staff, which ultimately would mean we would need to increase staff. We would build 2 maintenance yards, probably spend more money on this, and then have to deal with the inefficiencies of having 2 locations, and probably need to increase staffing for both parks and public works. So we've looked at stuff outside of that geographic range I gave you. We've looked at the south side of 18. We've looked at, is it viable to basically buy a bulldozer and put it on the east side of I-5? That way, if there's ever an earthquake, we have a bulldozer to push our way across I-5. So I mean, we've looked at all of that, and we keep coming back to this. The point I want to make sure I'm super clear on is that is part of what this is to do, though, is to have a consultant look at that. That way it's not just John and EJ saying that. It actually is, a real estate agent that does this professionally has evaluated this, and we'll let them come to the conclusion that they do and go from there. Like I said, Public Works and Parks have been looking at this and having this conversation with council for close to 15 years at this point. I'm pretty confident in the answer, but I'm not the real estate professional. I'm the Public Works director. So if they come to a different conclusion that council prefers, then that's what we'll do.
Okay. Thank you. I'm looking at my screen right now. I think the next person have question is Lydia, and then Council Member Caruso, and then
I think Mr. Baruso should go first because he's been waiting also.
Okay.
So okay, thank you. So really, it's just more of a comment, and also, yes, I wouldn't mind going with the building. I know what building this is, but for me, it's the biggest thing. It's a safety thing, because that building is, remember right, pretty old. But I would be willing to go look at that just to make sure want to look at again to kind of reaffirm what we want to do with it. And I don't, you know, I agree. I said if we don't want to spend too much money right now either, but I know in the long run, if we wait longer, it's going to cost more to do. So consulting thing, I know the cost is pretty high right now, but I think we probably should look at that. But again, EJ, I'm willing to go out to the building and take a look at it again.
Sure. So I'll email Jerry Lynn as soon as we get done with this for both Linda and Greg and get her to set something up.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Greg. Lydia? Lydia?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I couldn't get it off mute. Thank you so much. And I know I'm not on.
You're breaking up.
But
Lydia?
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, but you're breaking up.
Okay, 1 second. Oh, no.
Let's try again.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just stepping outside now. Is this better?
Yep.
Or not?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
it's better.
all right, I'll talk fast. What I wanted to say is I'm with Mark Topang about what you said. I think we need to go ahead and move forward in whatever capacity because it needs to happen, needs to be done, and we've heard this presentations before. So that was just lending my support. But if it's going to full council, I'm totally open to that. But in terms of my question is about the location. Oh shoot! Sorry, I stepped outside and there's a kid. My question really is about that location. I know you talked about the geographic, like making sure it's kind of accessible or maybe kind of central, but I don't find that spot or that location to be central. So that is my question really, because it's further south for the city. And I know you've looked up, you said multiple locations. And so that would be my only question really about that particular location.
So if we could put our site in the absolute perfect location, it would be along 320th between Pack Highway and First Avenue. That would be the absolute, as far as for both parks and public works, that provides essentially the best point of access to the areas where we need to go frequently. Certainly there's always trade-offs where, if we go a little further south and we have to deal with something on 276 that takes longer to get there, and the opposite is true as well. But based on the history of service requests and where parks are and, everything else where all of our heavy infrastructure falls on the public works side, like I said, if we could plop it in the middle of the intersection at Pack Highway and 320th, that would be perfect. Obviously, that's not a 15-acre intersection. Obviously, that's not going to work. So that's where that box starts to come in. And when you get south of 330th, that's where you really start having an impact on response times for all of us on the north. And likewise, north of 308 is where you start running into service problems on the south end of the city. So, it's geographically, you're correct. It's not the center point of the city. It's the center point of where we have service, though.
Thank you, Lydia. I have Council Member
Can I add one more
Copan.
thing then?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So, and this
Lydia, it's breaking up again.
Okay, never mind. Okay, I'm done then. I'll type it in.
Shoot me an email, Lydia, if it works.
Council Member Copan.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind the committee that there's a couple things that we get to keep in mind. One of them is that by moving the facility potentially to this south of 312th, we're actually moving it onto city-owned property. And as EJ said, that's going to reduce our cost for doing this necessary thing substantially by about $4 to $5 million because of the land acquisition that doesn't need to occur. The other side of this too is that we can sell the property that we currently have the maintenance facility on and recoup part of the cost. So there's a lot of things being put in place to make the financing of this project a reality. And I think we haven't built the capital stack yet, to borrow an old term, but we're not starting from ground zero looking for funding. There are some preliminary funding in place. And again, I have to emphasize, based on what I've seen, this is absolutely necessary for us to do something. So whether it's this particular solution or another solution that the real estate consultant comes up with, I'm good with it, anything as long as it's the right answer. But we need to move forward, in my mind.
Thank you. I
Chair, I would
go ahead.
I will just kind of remind everyone. So the proposal is to use 2019 REIT funding. So I hear some of the comments about the funding, but this is restricted funding that we can't use for other things anyway. The only thing it can be applied to is capital construction. So to take Councilmember Kopang's point a little further, this isn't money we can, even outside of this, it's not money we can reassign to something else.
Thank you. I see Ade has his hands up. Ade?
Thank you.
Ade.
I think
Yeah.
I just want to add a little bit more to what Councilmember Copeland mentioned. We need to be careful to do what the Sound Transit did to us, to ourselves. If you go out and buy additional property, you are moving those properties off the tax roll. So you are actually decreasing your own tax base. So just something for the council to keep in mind. Secondly, safety. I think whatever amount of money that we are going to spend, if that property, the roof were to collapse on one of your employees, I think that is something for the council to keep in mind. Financing option, yes, Councilmember Kochman, in a way you're right, the economy that we're getting into, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But regardless of if the council decides to build this building, we're going to borrow money. If you are going to borrow the money, this is the perfect time to borrow the money. Thirdly, and some of the council members will remember this, the Performing Arts Center, when it got onto the drawing board, the price was actually less than what we ended up building it for. So if the council is going to build this, you want to be ready and take advantage of low cost of labor. Because if you wait till the economy starts picking up, again, just like we did for Performing Arts Center, you're gonna pay more. So that is something for the council to keep in mind. I do believe that the study, if the council wants, can say, okay, we want the consultant to study these options, that option, or whatever, which will include a couple of other locations. But again, if you have to spend a lot of money in acquiring another property, that will increase the cost, and you will be taking taxable properties off the tax roll, which will further put the city in a very difficult position, just like the Sound Transit property acquisitions is doing to us.
Great, thank you, Ade. Councilmember Kochma, I see your hands is up.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Couple of things. We're talking about a project to be built in 2024. So, and I really appreciated Dave's comments about taking property off the tax rolls. I'm very concerned about that as well. I'm wondering, first of all, you're talking about swim money, so I don't think we're borrowing money. We have plenty of swim money, but I always thought swim money was only to be used to prevent flooding. Other than that, have we looked at Brook Lake at all?
Yes, it's outside. It gets back to the conversation. We would need to build 2 maintenance yards to do that.
Okay. We've talked before. There's other properties in Celebration Park that are, you know, we have 40 acres of wetlands. And I know that you can't build over a wetland, but I certainly think you can put, we've talked before about putting a brick building at Celebration Park to house maintenance vehicles like lawnmowers. So I'm wondering if we couldn't break up some of this, because you're talking about a yard for the gravel, sand, so on. And then you're talking about a building for our people to be in. I'm just trying to think of how we can use existing property. I'm still also wondering about whether we can use swim. I don't have the rationalization for using swim money for this project. But what we're talking about right now is using REIT money for a plan. And I can't tell you, I think if you look on your shelves, over the 20 years I was on the council, 14 years I was on the council, how many plans are sitting there gathering dust. But be that as it may, I realize that we have to do something. I'm willing to look into it. I just have more questions. Thank you.
So the swim, yeah, and by all means, we should make sure your questions are answered. So Celebration Park does have a maintenance facility that's used by parks on it. I can let John chime in, but I don't think there's sufficient ground out there outside of building on the wetlands beyond what's already constructed out there. The conversation on funding, you are correct to the point that surface water funding can only be used to support surface water activities. That being said, since they are one of the users of the maintenance yard, we can fund their portion of the maintenance yard with surface water funds. So principally, there's 3 groups that use the yard: the surface water maintenance staff, the streets maintenance staff, and the parks maintenance staff. Community development and police also use it, but to a much lesser degree. So the 3 main users of the yard is where the bulk of the funding conversation comes from. And REIT can be used by streets and parks. Swim can be used by, for swim. So that's where, swim can fund their portion, which is kind of what that $2 million is tagged at. So that's the conversation. Certainly, when there's a funding strategy in place, it needs to go through council. It needs to be blessed by everybody. Swim money is not limited to just flooding. It's everything in support of the surface water utility. Just like they pay rent to City Hall, they pay IT for computers, they pay for everything else. That all comes out of surface water money as well.
Ade, I have, I see your name, your
Yes.
hands up.
Actually, I just want to expand just so that Councilmember Koshman and everybody understand this. I think actually the major user of this facility will be street maintenance, which gets most of its funding from the general fund. I think in order not to get into trouble, we can now use swim money to benefit others other than swim. So the parties that will be using the facility, as EJ pointed out, Parks and Rec, which is general fund, police, which will be general fund, street, which get most of its money from general fund, then swim will pay for its own. And whatever is left for those other partners will have to come from somewhere. General fund, there's not enough money in REIT today to be able to pay for whatever amount of 10 million, 5 million, whatever it is, to pay for it. That is where the issue of borrowing money came along, we will need to borrow money. We cannot cash this out.
All right. Thank you. Hearing both sides, I think I have to agree with Councilmember Copan, and that is instead of holding this up at the committee level, we could vote and move this out of the committee so that it's go to the full council for consideration and discussion. And in the meantime, Council Member Kochmar and Baruso could meet with EJ and John, to, whatever questions or concern that they may have, EJ may be able to address that. How's that sound?
Thank you.
All right. With that,
I'd love to make a motion. I move to forward option 1 to the May 5th, 2020 council consent agenda for approval. Or should we move it to business?
No, for
Let's
business.
move it to business. Yes, yeah. So I move to forward option 1 to the May 5th, 2020 council business agenda for approval. So you can do another business presentation, EJ.
That's fine.
And I'll second that, but not necessarily for approval, for discussion and possible approval.
Okay, got that. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Yeah, I just,
All right.
just in addressing Councilmember Kochmar's concern, everything is up for debate. So we're not saying we're going to approve it by moving it forward for approval. We're just saying we're going to move it forward for discussion
Thank you.
and
Thank
potential. Yeah.
you.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Our next item is proposed memorandum of understanding between the cities of Auburn, Federal Way, Kent, Renton, and Tukwila for Puget Sound Emergency Radio Network presentation. And our city attorney, Ryan Carl, will present.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I actually have the next 2 items, and they're related, and I probably should have presented the item E first. So I'm going to talk about PSERN generally, because item D, which is the MOU between the Valleycom cities, is about how we're going to be represented on the PSERN, in the PSERN organization. So PSERN is the acronym that they're using to be shorthand for the Puget Sound Emergency Radio Network. It's a $280 million project that has been in the works for about 5 years now. Previously, council approved an interlocal agreement for the acquisition and building of the network. That is almost completed, and the network is about to come online. And this is the operations ILA, item E. So what the ILA sets up is an organization that the building entity is going to turn over basically all the assets of this network to the operator, and it'll be called PSERN. PSERN will be governed by a board of directors. There'll be 4 of them. Those board of directors will represent Seattle, King County, the EBSCA cities, which is the east side version of Valleycom. It's the 911 service that handles Kirkland, Bellevue, and some of those cities over there, and then the Valleycom cities. So those 4 entities will each have 1 representative. So our representative will be chosen basically by the Valleycom board. And the idea is that the rep will be the voting member, and most likely most of the meetings will be attended by the Valleycom executive. So that's what the MOU is talking about. The larger thing, which is the PSERN network, is an 800 megahertz digital radio network. It's going to basically replace the entire analog radio system for King County. So currently we have an outdated system that's run by the county. It's analog. The radios and the components to the radios And when I say radio, I mean the big transmitters that are up on the towers are out of date and cannot be the parts. You can't even get the parts anymore from the manufacturer. They have to buy them on the secondary market. It's just, it needs to be replaced. Recognizing that, a bond levy was passed in 2015, and that's where the $280 million came from. This new radio network takes over all the frequencies of all those entities. So Seattle gave up all their frequencies, Valleycom, and well, Valleycom had already didn't have any really, but King County and EBSCA are giving up their radio frequencies as well. And this one entity will run all of the emergency radio network for the entire area. This gives us a huge advantage in cross communication during emergencies and things like that. All of our people will be on the same frequencies. It's also digital communications, meaning that we can upgrade it more easily in the future, and maybe even someday go to encrypted, which would be nice because right now none of our communications are encrypted. The ILA talks about, when I say the ILA, the PSERN Interlocal establishes the qualifications for the executive director. It also lays out the service level requirements, meaning they have a standard that they have to meet, and which is a certain coverage area for each city. So we've been told repeatedly that this should improve some of our coverage issues that we've had in our city for radio networks. And basically, I think they have to have 99% coverage. Those are the main points. The MOU between the Valleycom cities is pretty straightforward. It says that the board will annually vote one of the people to sit on the board, and usually it's a mayor or a city manager, to be the representative for all of us at PSERN. I guess I should also point out the ILA for PSERN can be amended by the directors, except for it cannot be amended as to the powers of the board, voting righs, and new parties being added. That those would have to be agreed to by the city councils. Do you have any questions about the PSERN network or the MOU that we're going to sign with Valleycom?
I guess not.
Yep. I have a question. My hand's up.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Let me-
okay. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, ever since we've had the problem with SCORE, I'm a little nervous about getting into these MOUs and interlocal agreements. I can see on the next item on the agenda, it's talking about the fact that we have 141,000 currently budgeted for this interlocal agreement. Is that yearly?
Yes.
We certainly need this. Obviously we're going to have. Are we going to have just a member of any of the cities on this board, or will there be a member of each city on the board?
The board of directors we will share one representative with the Valleycom cities. So Auburn, the ones that we just called out. So Auburn, Federal Way, Kent, Renton, and Tukwila will all have one representative to represent us on the board of directors.
So
I would point out that, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
This is significantly different. This is the same model that we use for Valleycom, which has run very well for many, many years.
Mhm.
The issue we had with the jail was that the metric that drove cost sharing was something that the cities could manipulate.
Mhm.
That is not the case in this.
Yeah, I
This is
recognize that.
driven by a number of radios that we use. And
Yeah.
one of the major provisions that we all fought about for a long time was basically every member will pay the same price for each radio.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'm perfectly all on board with the whole thing. I just want to make sure we cover our bases as we're going in.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I should point out, this is kind of a false choice. It's not, we don't really have much of a choice here. This entity will own all of the frequencies. If you want to have radios, you'll have to get them from this entity. So we can either be a part of the management of it, or we could be a customer. Actually, that's not even true. Sorry. We have to be a member if we want to have access to the network. they don't have a membership scheme.
Lydia, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to try again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is, you said there'll be a representative from one of the cities on the board. Is that a rotating seat then, maybe annually or whenever, or at whatever frequency?
Yes. So, I'm sorry, it's a 2-year term. And so every 2 years, the Valleycom board members, who are the executives of the Valleycom cities, will elect their representative.
So does that mean from different cities, or could it be the same person being re-elected?
Whoever they elect. So it could be the same city over and over again if that's what the board kept electing.
And do we have a say in that at all if we so choose to put that in the MOU?
That's the entire MOU. That is the gist of the agreement. We have one vote, just like all the other cities. So we have 1 of 5 votes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else? I try to make sure that I don't miss anybody here. Nope.
Councilmember Tran, Chair Tran, move forward the proposal to the May 5th, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second that.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Ryan, you have the next item too.
I do. So this is for action to move the proposed resolution authorizing the city to join the PSERN Operator Interlocal Cooperation Agreement. This is the same entity that we were just talking about. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But this is the actual interlocal for the PSERN network.
Committee members?
Councilmember Chair Tran, I move to forward the proposed resolution to the May 5th, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second that.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. 3-0. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
And now we move on to vouchers, March 2020. Our Finance Director, Ade.
Yes, sorry, Chase will be making the presentation and he's ready.
Good evening, Council Chair Tran, Council members, and Council President. Before you are the AP vouchers from March 16th to April 15th, 2020, and payroll vouchers between March 1st and March 31st. We'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you have in addition to the email that was sent before the meeting.
Committee members, any questions? Council President Honda?
Thank you. I was just going to raise my hand. You're faster than I am. I don't have any more questions on the vouchers, but thank you very much for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Any other council members have any questions?
No, Councilmember Chair Tran, I move to forward the vouchers to the May 5th, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second that.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Moving on to the last item of the day, monthly financial report, March 2020. Ade or Chase?
Good evening, Council Chair Tran, Council Committee members, Council President. Before you is the March 2020 monthly financial report, and I'll be highlighting a few areas just to start this report out, I want to make comment on some of the taxes like sales tax. There is a 2-month delay, so the amount collected for January is what's reported for March. And so it's not going to include the COVID-19 pandemic in the sales tax numbers. So sales tax is about 80,000 or 3% above 2020 year-to-date budget, and about 200,000 or 8% above 2019 year-to-date collections. So currently, through the month of March, it looks reasonable. Community development permits and fees is about 200,000 or 28.3% below 2020 year-to-date budget, and about 300,000 or 32.6% below 2019 year-to-date collections. Some of that has to do with some large permits that were received last year within the first 3 months, including DeVita and Federal Way Premier Storage. Our business license fees, although, are looking pretty good and are 7,000 or 3.6% above 2020 year-to-date budget, and 76,000 or 58.4% above 2019 year-to-date collections. We went live with the state system on October 3rd, 2019, and we are seeing a gradual increase with our business license fees since that time. I'm on page 113 now, and our utility tax revenue received year to date, it totals 2.1 million and is 200,000 or 12.1% above 2019 year-to-date actual, and about 20,000 or 1.4% below 2020 year-to-date budget. Some of those received, like cable, it has to do with timing of payments. Electricity and gas are about on target with prior years. Real estate excise tax, 2020 year-to-date revenues of 600,000 is below 2019 year-to-date actual by approximately 453,000 or 41.8%, and below 2020 year-to-date budget by 172,000 or 21.4%. We partially accounted for the decrease in real estate excise tax from the prior year. Last year we received 5.17 million in total, and we budgeted 3.64 for this year. So we came down from the number because you can only sell so much large property so many times. And so it was expected that it would decrease slightly from the prior year. If you turn with me now to page 122, 123, you'll see there that that's where the tables for the Federal Way Community Center and Dumas Bay Center are listed. Both of those facilities closed to the public on March 12th due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The revenues received of approximately 400,000 is below 2020 year-to-date budget for the Federal Way Community Center by 118,000 or 24.4%. Year-to-date, 312,000. The full annual budgeted utility tax subsidy has been transferred to the Federal Way Community Center for operations. The Dumas Bay Center, year-to-date revenue of 128,000 is 64,000 or 33.4% below 2020 year-to-date budget of 192, and also slightly below 2019 actual. Their fund is within the reserve fund balance policy set by council of 1.5 million. Their current ending fund balance is $1,538,385. We have added a few things that were requested at the last meeting. If you turn with me to page 120, we added the jail debt service payments for the current year as well as prior years, and identified what the city owes in principal as of 12/31/2019. As of 12/31/2019, score debt service is 10,945,000. Now, if you turn with me to page 122, we also included the Federal Way Community Center debt service budgeted payment of approximately 813,000 budgeted for 2020. with a debt service principal remaining as of 12/31/2019 of $9.38 million. And lastly, on page 124 with the Performing Arts and Event Center, we added the debt service budgeted payment as well as the 12/31/2019 balance of debt service principal of $4,840,000 for the Performing Arts and Event Center. And lastly, it was requested to add a COVID-19 update, and on page 125, we've listed the year-to-date expenditures through the month of March that have been tracked under the COVID-19 code. Payroll expenditures totaling $96,000, supplies totaling $4,000 for total expenditures of $101,000. And if you turn with me to the last page, 126, this is a listing of each of the fund balances for each of the funds that we list out every month. The general and street fund ending fund balance is $6,031,643 with a required fund balance of $9.5 million. This is partly due to timing of property tax payments that we receive twice a year, as well as the COVID-19 response resulting in less revenue in some areas. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Committee members, do you have any questions for Chase?
Just council member, just on page 120, I just wanted to make sure all of you are following this with SCORE. If you remember, before part of the reason why we left SCORE was the fee. If you look at that page, we budgeted for intergovernmental jail service SCORE, $2.9 million. And as of the end of the fourth quarter, we've only spent $300,000. So I was responding to Mira's request this afternoon, and I pointed out that that is one of the reasons why we will fare better than most of the other cities. When we were with SCORE, if we had lower ADP, we would still pay the budgeted amount. This year, we will pay only what we use. So as of the fourth quarter, we've only paid $300,000, and we should have paid by now about $725,000. So the ADP that we have now, and I think Chief Wang is on the line, the ADP that we have now is actually almost half of the budgeted amount. Again, we will only pay what we use. If we were with SCORE, it would not really matter what we use. We will pay what is in the budget. This is a good thing, and that is part of the benefit of the decision that you made last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chase, and thank you, Ade. Councilmember Kochma, I see your hand is up.
Hey, thanks, Chair Tran. I just want to point out, as Ade has already said, and Chase has already said, that these are numbers to March. And, we don't have a handle yet on what the revenues are going to be going forward. We don't know how long our buildings will be closed because of social distancing. If you're inside a building, I'm talking about Dumas Bay Center, I'm talking about the Performing Arts Center, I'm talking about the Fedway Community Center. So the revenues are going to be coming in, but we're still going to be making the bond payments. And all I want to say is that I'm very concerned. I just want to say my own opinion about any new projects, taking on any new projects moving forward. I just think that we need to consolidate and be patient and wait to see what's going to happen here. We may have a resurgence in the fall of both the flu and COVID-19, and that concerns me greatly. And so this is just a caution of concern from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kochman, you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. I think we should be very careful. And I think next month, month of May will actually be our month of at least will give us a small look in what the future looks like. But you're absolutely right. We don't really know what the future holds and how long the lockdown will be. And we should be careful in committing to a long-term spending or keep an eye on our spending. Absolutely.
Great comments. Thank you. Is there anybody else?
I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So this is Susan Honda. Ade, when will, so with people being able to not pay their property tax until I think it's June, when will we see that hit us?
I think what that delay in property tax has done, the money that we will have received in June will now be in July. Property tax, just to be clear, is unlike sales tax. Even though we don't want to get there, the city, the property owner owe us this money. It's just a matter of when that money will be paid. And part of and the amount when it is paid fluctuates from year to year because they have both May and October. That is part of why you set up the reserve to manage the cash flow, not necessarily to be spent, but to manage the cash flow, pending the time that it will come. So the payment that will be made in June, we will get it in July.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then I have one other thing to say. Today there was a webinar from MRSC, and it was called How Your Agency Can Survive and Recover Fiscally from the COVID-19 Outbreak. It was really, really good. And if anyone has a chance to view that, I would watch it. It's an hour and 6 minutes. It went overtime a little bit, but it's certainly worth your time to watch it.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I was on that webinar, and some of the things that they mentioned, I think to some degree, like Council Member Koshman was saying, we need to, if we don't have to invest in capital investment, we need to be careful about that. We need to keep an eye on our property tax, but they did mention it's a sure money that will come in. And also there's still some unknown. I think you're absolutely right. It was actually I will be sharing some of the chart that Mike shared in there. Actually, probably will be one of the things that we'll be including in your report as we go by, where they broke the sales tax by category. And I think that is a real good idea. We want to monitor how our retail is doing. We do know that some retail section will do really well. We also know some will do really bad, or some of the businesses will go out of business. And I think I'm hoping that will be a part of the presentation that we'll make with you, make to you next week.
Oh, thank you.
Great. All right. If there's no other discussion or questions, may I have the motion, please?
Chair
I'd be
Tran,
happy to make a motion. I move to forward the March 2020 monthly financial report to the May 5th, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
thank you, and I'll second that.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Well, that's conclude our FedRAX meeting for today. Is there anything else that anyone want to share before we say goodbye?
No, be fun for us to all get to see each other in real life together one of these years.
Well, it's good to see everybody here today, and please stay safe. Take good care of yourself and your family.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good to see you
Thank
guys.
you.
Have a good
Thank you.
evening.
All right.
Okay,
Goodbye
good
for
night.
now. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.